So welcome everybody. My name is Robert Godoy. I'm the Capacity Development and Policy Support Officer at the Secretariat of the Convention on Wetlands, and I'm going to here be presenting on the first 2 points, which is getting a general knowledge on the convention, its bodies, its structure, how it works, and the work we do. So first of all, I mean, just to recap a bit, I'm pretty sure that you're all very familiar with this, but why wetlands are important and why are they being lost. According to the convention, the definition of wetlands are areas of marsh, fen, peatland, water, natural, artificial, permanent, or temporary, with water that is static, flowing, fresh, brackish, or salt. So that entails quite a bit of a big range of ecosystems. They provide with many services: disaster risk reduction, climate change mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity, food security, and freshwater supply, and they sustain sustainable livelihoods. But as you all know, this valuable ecosystem is being lost. Just to throw a bit of data, since 1970, 81% of inland wetland species populations and 36% of coastal marine species have declined, according to WWF's Living Planet Index. So this is just to set the scene on why the convention was created. Um, the convention is a international multilateral environmental agreement, which is an agreement that contracting parties, which are the countries, sign, and they commit to the wise use and conservation of wetlands when they sign this convention. Um, the convention, when it was signed, it was the and now it's the one of the first of the model multilateral environmental agreements on the conservation of natural resources, and it is still currently the only one to focus on a single ecosystem. But a brief history of what when it was signed. It was just 2nd of February of 1971 in the city of Ramsar. That's why it's also known as the Ramsar Convention, but its formal name is Convention on Wetlands. And since 1997, this 2nd of February has been celebrated as World Wetlands Day, to celebrate the signing of the convention. And since most recently 2022, it gained UN observance status. So when contracting parties or countries sign the convention, they adhere to the wise use concept. They commit themselves to wisely use all wetlands. So what does wise use means? According to the convention, the definition is the maintenance of the ecological character achieved through implementation of ecosystem approaches within the context of sustainable development. And by ecological character, we mean basically the combination of ecosystem components, services, and benefits that characterize a certain wetland. So it could be interpreted as basically sustainable use and protection and conservation of said wetlands. This is what we mean by wise use. So to go into more specifics onto what countries adhere, what countries commit to when they sign the convention, there's 3 pillars of the convention, the basic commitments. The first one is to work towards the wise use of all of their wetlands. As you may know, we all have a designation called Wetlands of International Importance, or Ramsar sites, but when countries sign, they commit to the wise use of all of their wetlands, not only the Ramsar sites. It is a general obligation for contracting parties, aka countries, to include wetland conservation considerations in their national planning, and they committed themselves to formulate and implement their planning to promote the wise use of wetlands in their territory. This is the first and most basic pillar, but we're moving to the second one, which is, as I mentioned, designate wetlands of international importance. I'm not going to go too much in depth into the designation process or the benefits of wetlands of international importance or Ramsar sites, because Ben Smith is going to do that right after me. But just so you know, when a country signs a convention, their first obligation is to designate at least one wetland of international importance to the Ramsar list, or the list of wetlands of international importance. This can vary a lot between countries. There's some countries that only have one Ramsar site designated, but there's countries, for example, I think the top one most is the United Kingdom, which has 175 designated wetlands of international importance. What besides designating them, they also commit to promote their conservation and to obviously wisely use them. We have certain mechanisms within the convention that help with the conservation and planning of these wetlands, which Ben Smith is going to go more in detail afterwards. And just to say that a wetland of international importance is designated based on their significance in terms of ecology and services and its uniqueness. There's a certain criteria that the convention has to ensure that a wetland of international importance is designated. All of this network of protected areas can be found in the Ramsar Sites Information Service. I'm going to post the link into the chat afterwards, so if you're curious, you can check all of the sites in there. So moving onto the third pillar, it's the international cooperation. Of course, as you know, wetlands are not strictly limited to country borders. They go beyond, in some cases, even to several countries. So it is a commitment from parties, from countries, when they sign the convention, to coordinate the support and the wise use of said wetlands within outside of their borders as well. To do that, they can also designate transboundary wetlands of international importance, which is a Ramsar site that goes across borders. There's all this. Just these are the basics of what the country commits to when they sign the convention, but it's a commitment. It's not a regulatory regime and has no punitive sanctions for violations or for defaulting treaty commitments. Nonetheless, despite not having punitive sanctions, contracting parties are definitely encouraged in a political way to comply with the convention. Even more, some countries go beyond that and they integrate the convention into their national legislation, making it have a more sound structural law system. It is does constitute a binding international law with an expectation of common equitability. So despite not having punitive sanctions, it is understood that when a country joins the convention, there's an expectation that he's going to commit and that he's going to comply with the commitments made. So where is the conventional wetlands today? Just a few data since that applies to nowadays. It's like in 2021, we celebrated the 50th anniversary. In 2022, as I mentioned before, World Wetlands Day gained UN observance, significantly impacting the outreach of said day. Currently, there are more than 2,400 wetlands of international importance, covering more than 255 million hectares. And as of 2022, there's 172 parties adhered to the convention. Parties, as I mentioned before, is another term for countries that signed the convention. So as now we know what countries commit to when they sign the convention, but how is the convention implemented? Well, how is it structured? It is an international body, so it can be a bit confusing sometimes. But the convention is divided into different bodies, and each of these bodies has a different function that helps with the implementation of the convention. Bodies can be divided roughly into three categories. There's two decision-making bodies, as the name implies. These are the bodies that actually take the decisions. There's advisory bodies, which provide advice to the decision-making bodies and to the supporting bodies on the scientific, technical, and communication, education, and participation matters. And there's the supporting body, which is the Secretariat. I'm going to go more in depth now into each body. So we have the topmost decision-making body of the convention, which is the Conference of the Parties. I'm sure if you're not too familiar with the multilateral environmental agreement world, maybe you have heard about COPs, such as the UNFCCC COP, which was it's quite famous in itself. So what does a COP mean for the Convention on Wetlands? It's the body of the convention that meets every 3 years, and it's constituted by all of the contracting parties. So the 172 parties meet every 3 years, and they agree on a work program, uh, budgetary arrangements, and guidance on a range of ongoing and emerging environmental issues. These vary widely within COPs, and it's adapted to the times and to the interests that draw from, for example, the scientific bodies as well, which I'm going to go into detail later. For example, during last COP, there was a resolution on the protection of small wetlands. 2 COPs ago, there was also a resolution on the designation of peatlands as wetlands of international importance because of their climate change mitigation and adaptation potential. Last COP happened in 2022, which was in Geneva. And the next COP will be COP15, which will be hosted in Zimbabwe in July 2025. So as I said, the COP meets every 3 years, but what happens in between these periods? These 3 years we refer to as a triennium. So during the triennium, there's the Standing Committee, which oversees the convention affairs and the activities of the Secretariat in between meetings of the COP. It represents the COP between this period, and they obviously act within the framework of the decisions made by the COP, because the COP is still the topmost decision-making body. Standing Committee is basically comprised of several contracting parties, which we call regional representatives, because each contracting party that is in the Standing Committee represents several contracting parties within their region. How are these parties elected is during the COP. They are elected to serve during the Standing Committee for the next 3 years to represent the countries in which they agree to. So we've covered now all the decision-making bodies, but how about the advisory bodies? First, we have the Scientific and Technical Review Panel. As the name implies, they provide scientific and technical guidance to the Conference of the Parties, to the Standing Committee, and to the Secretariat. They are guided by the priorities identified by contracting parties during the COP, but they also identify their priorities themselves. This is all reflected into their work plan. As I mentioned already, all the convention works within this triennium period, within these 3 years. So does the STIP. They meet once a year, the same as the Standing Committee, and they produce scientific and technical guidance and outputs that provides basis for the implementation of the convention. They respond to specific needs, which they identify or the COP identifies. You can see all the excellent work the Scientific and Technical Review Panel produces into our website. There's several, from policy briefs, from technical reports, from practitioners' guides, and from just information papers, depending on what the need is. Then the second advisory body is the Communication, Education, Participation, and Awareness Oversight Panel, which is the CEPA panel. Again, I'm not going to go too much into detail into the CEPA panel because this is going to be covered afterwards in this webinar. But the main function of the panel is to monitor the CEPA program. What this program it has many objectives, but the overarching goal is to people taking action for the conservation and wise use of wetlands. So the panel advises the Standing Committee and the Secretariat on priorities on CEPA priorities, and also including priorities for the Scientific and Technical Review Panel. For example, there's a member of the STIP that sits within the Oversight Panel, and also the Oversight Panel, the CEPA Oversight Panel, provides input to the STIP. And finally, we have the secretariat, which I am a part of, this merry team of 20 so people. We carry the day-to-day coordination of the convention's activities. We have many roles, but this, for example, as an example, we maintain the list of wetlands of international importance. We maintain the database. We help designate, we help update these Ramsar sites. We facilitate new contracting parties to the convention. We organize all the meetings from the COP, not only from the COP, but also the Standing Committee, the STIP, and the SEPA panel. And we publish all the decisions, resolutions, recommendations of the COP. So we are 23 people, but we are led by Dr. Musonda Mumba, who is the Secretary General and the face of the convention. So now that I've talked a bit on how the convention works and how it's structured, it's also important to highlight the partnerships that the convention has. So we, for example, we are part of the Biodiversity Liaison Group, which was established in 2002. And it's a liaison group with other conventions, with other multilateral environmental agreements that are work within the biodiversity theme. Most notably, the CBD, the CMS, CITES, the Treaty on Plant Genetic Resource for Food and Agriculture, the International Plant Protection Convention, and the World Heritage Convention. To explain more or less on how we work with these conventions, as an example of with the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, with whom we have a joint work plan. As you know, there's many overarching aspects between the conservation of wetlands and the conservation of biological diversity. So we address this in our joint work plan, and we are currently working on a new joint work plan, which is going to cover the next period of 5 years. We also have one partnership with a private company, which is the Danone Group. In case you didn't know, the Danone Group established the Danone Evian Fund for Water and the Fund for Nature to support the convention's work to raise awareness and promote the sustainable use and management of wetlands. This partnership also contributes financially to the World Wetlands Day Awareness Campaign and to the Ramsar Wetland Conservation Awards. Moving on from private partnerships, we also have with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which was it's the partnership most recent, and it represents a distinct and timely opportunity to join efforts and make meaningful headway into preventing, halting, reversing the degradation of our planet's wetlands. Most notably, though, on the partnership side, we have our international organization partners, which probably is most relevant to this webinar. These international organization partners, or IOPs, are 6 global organizations that are recognized by the COP as being IOPs. These organizations are BirdLife, IUCN, Wetlands International, WWF, IMWI, and WWT. So these IOPs, they provide invaluable support for the work of the convention. As you know, the convention is quite an overarching theme, so they provide super important field level implementation assistance. They provide expert technical advice. They support the use of the convention guidelines in their own work, and they promote the convention, like such as with this webinar. This is a great example of how an IOP works with the convention as it's organized by WWT. And they participate regularly as observers in all meetings, provided input. We're drawing to the end of my presentations. But I wanted to remark that all this information, and in way more detail than I've been going through, is available into the introductory course to the Convention on Wetlands. This is a standalone self-paced interactive online training. It's made available for free in Informea platform. You only have to register. And if you complete it, you get a certificate of completion on the introductory course to the conventional wetlands. So if you're interested to know more and into more details, of course, I'm available for any questions that you have now, but also you can go to the and take the introductory course if you would like. So thank you very much for your attention. I'll take any questions or I'll leave it to Chris now.